Hey everyone, it's your favorite host Marcus Norman of the Gentleman Style Podcast Show, and today we are bringing something that is near and dear to my heart. We are going to be talking with an expert, a licensed professional counselor who specializes in training in trauma and relationships. And so she's going to help us figure out the who's, the what's, the whys, and everything in between, and get to a better place mentally. See what she's seeing and is experiencing in her industry as a professional licensed counselor. And I love this topic. We're going to talk about the mind and how the mind works and what she's been experiencing and her experience. She recently released her first book, Stop Avoiding It, offering practical coping skills to navigate life's changes. And maybe we'll be able to get some inside sneak peeks as to what is in this book and what people can expect. So help me welcome to the stage the incredible Miss Gina.
Hi, Marcus.
How are you, Miss Gina? Looking
Good.
Fabulous.
Thank you. It's good to see you today.
Absolutely. It's good to be seen. Thank you for making
Yes.
time. Thank you for sharing space with us, because this is tremendous. And what you're doing in the world is absolutely necessary. It's not easy being a professional counselor. And I wanted to ask a warm-up question. What got you started in the mental health space? You could do anything, right? You could have chosen any profession, any field. Why a professional counselor?
Well, it's a great question. It's one of those, maybe I was always born to be. So I went to college for, in my undergrad, I was in a psych. I graduated with psychology. And after I graduated, I worked in a psych hospital with teenagers and adolescents on a locked unit. Worked there for 3 years, ran their programs and did behavioral health, all the groups and everything else that it takes as a young coming up through the ranks of psych, and ended up getting pregnant with I got married and got pregnant with my first set of twins, and then had a second set of twins. Was a stay-home mom for several years as I was raising the kids, but never really left the field. Always kept pushing myself and learning more and more about the field. I was always been fascinated in counseling, always been fascinated in how the brain works and how we could live better and more effectively. And so just always pushed myself in those areas. And when my youngest set of twins was in high school, went back and got my master's and started to, and after I finished my training, worked in crisis during my training time, worked with the Phoenix Fire Department and their crisis department, where we showed up to every crisis. So usually suicides. And just cut my teeth on trauma. From there, I went into community mental health, where I saw so much trauma, and just really started working with EMDR, which is a trauma treatment that we use. And after those sessions, I ended up opening my own practice in 2019. And so it's just been a process, and I love the field. I'm so happy to work in such a field. So anyway, that's my journey. Couldn't be happier to be working with this population and with my treatments. And it's interesting, I developed a huge program when I was working in community mental health, which was called Coping Skills. We developed it and we worked through like how all the different coping skills. No one wanted to teach coping skills. Everybody is like, oh, it's such a boring group class. So I took it and I was like, well, it shouldn't be this boring, because we need coping skills. So we put a lot of neuroscience with it, a lot of TED Talks with it, of every expert in the different coping skills. So if I was teaching active listening, I would have all the experts in there. So we would do that, and it just boomed. Everybody loved the class. I had so many people enjoying the class. And so when I opened my private practice, I work in an area that is a little more affluent. And I thought, I wonder if the women in Scottsdale would find coping skills as valuable. And I'll tell you, I brought it to the local church, and I put it in with, I started infusing it all with scripture, because that started becoming so powerful. It was so much neuroscience and scripture were just always corresponding with each other. And so when I put it with scripture and brought it into the church, 100 women signed up immediately. And I started to realize that it's like, it didn't matter where you were on the ladder of how well you were doing or how poor you were doing. We all need coping skills. We all need to learn how to live more effectively. And so that's kind of the story of even what pushed me into my book. So
I love that.
that's what we did. Yeah.
I love that. I was wondering if there was any examples where your friends or maybe family where you just found yourself talking to them and helping them work through their own issues and then saying, you know what? And someone said to you, this is, you need to be here. You need to be a
Mm.
therapist. You need to
Yeah.
get paid for what you're doing because you're doing it for free. Um,
Yeah.
that is sometimes what I hear in this profession is like, listen,
Mhm.
you're performing counseling with your own
Yeah.
friends, your own family. You need to get
Well,
paid.
well, I almost would say every mom is a therapist, you know?
That's true.
So, I mean, whether you're paid for it or not, it's like when you're raising kids and you're a therapist, and you're a mom, you are figuring out and watching the brain go through all the developmental stages. And so, absolutely, I think my life definitely did train me for it. But I think early on, even when I was young, I would only want to read books that had tragedy in them. I was always thinking about, all my life I had considered, back in the 70s when I was young, I thought I was going to be an orphanage owner. So I
Really?
would think about like, oh, the orphanage kids coming back then. It was a lot of talk in the 70s was about a lot of kids being adopted from Vietnam. And so there was a lot of talk on that. And so I just always, I just always pictured that as being part of my life. And so that's why I say my whole life. I mean, I've definitely, and talk to my friends, they always probably would say that I was always somewhat of a therapist, but,
And a giver. And a
oh,
giver, a big heart of gold, right? It takes a huge heart to
mm,
want to even consider that. An
mm.
orphanage, right? Where it seems like children are left behind. That takes a huge, huge heart. Round of applause for Miss Gina. That's huge.
a, a funny story about that is when I got out of college, which was like 1989, I called, I don't even know who I called. And I was like, where would I find an orphanage to go and work?
Really? You
They
wanted
laughed.
to you want to
Someone
find
laughed at
one?
me. Yeah, I wanted to go find an orphanage, which did not exist in the States because they said, well, they're all group homes now.
Oh wow.
Oh my gosh. So it's funny because it was just always on my mind. And at that point, I was only like 22 years old. So it, it
It stuck with
was,
you.
yeah,
It stuck
yeah.
with you. It didn't
So
change.
I went
You
into the psych hospital instead, and that was just perfect. So
so it fit close to it, right?
yeah, yeah. In
Close as
some
you're gonna
ways,
get.
because in a lot of our psych hospitals, and especially in the children's unit, I worked in a children's unit ages 4 to 12. And oftentimes those kids have oppositional defiant disorder and have a really rough family life. And it is the safest place for them to be. And that was just a really sweet time in my life. I really connected with the kids, and it taught me so much about trauma and even parenting, and how family systems impact so much of what a kid grows up and does, and how they feel about themselves and so forth. So it was a beautiful learning experience for me.
Absolutely. I wanted to touch on something you brought up earlier. You said EMDR
Mm-hmm.
is a form of treatment used in therapy. Can you explain or help unpack that for us for those who are unfamiliar with so that style of therapy? Because to me,
Yeah.
when some people hear therapy, they think just okay, I'm just spilling my guts out to Miss
Mm.
Gina and I'm telling her, and then Miss Gina is going to give me some homework. She's going to give me a plan, some action plans. What is specifically unique about EMDR? If you can speak to that, please.
Yeah. Okay. EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So it's easier to say EMDR than all those words, but if it was developed with in the sense that the eye movement calms the brain and lets the brain process. So very similar to sleeping, how we move our eyes bilaterally back and forth in REM sleep. It is also the same kind of idea. So Francine Shapiro developed it back in the 80s. She had realized the startling thing is that she had cancer, and she noticed that she couldn't process how overwhelming the feeling was to even accept the illness and the diagnosis. And she looked up and her eyes started jutting back and forth. And for some reason, she was able to process things that she hadn't been able to process. Meaning just be able to think about it without her system saying, I don't want to think about it. This scares me. Let's not think about it anymore. Let's put it away. That's a very disturbing thought, which is what happens to us a lot when we're thinking about hard things, traumas, even really just disturbing memories. It is very hard to think about them because the conscious mind wants to push it down and make you feel safer. So that spurred on a ton of research, and now you become certified in it. And what happens is when I find a client who has a disturbing memory that keeps on like haunting them in the present. Sometimes it gets really disturbing. So it's a big range of things that we use EMDR for. But I've had clients where they've been held at gunpoint and raped. And every time they think of that thought, it disturbs them so bad, which of course, it disturbs them so bad, they'll break down. They're not able to think about it. They're hard to process. It's hard to talk about. It's hard to move forward. They're stuck into the trauma. And so we can actually work through that with EMDR, which I put buzzies. There's a little buzzies that go in your ears, and you hold them in your hands, and you bring up the disturbing memory, and we work from there. And when you're in that like bilateral state where you're just bringing up the memories, you're able to it almost looks like maybe a movie. It just brings up everything that's related to that very traumatic situation. And it isn't really talk therapy. You're quiet through it. I usually ask, what were your last couple of thoughts? And so the person is able to really process something, being awake, without getting very maybe involved in the thoughts of how horrible they are. And so it allows the brain to just start filing them. I always say it's like cleaning up the desk, and you start to put them away a lot easier. We can't take away the memory, but we can definitely fade the emotional reaction to it. And it is amazing the movement we get from EMDR. And I do that even with people with a lot of anxiety, maybe a really strong thought that keeps them in their anxiety. So we can use EMDR in a lot of different areas. It does not have to be extremely high trauma. So,
So
although it
so
can.
so help me out. If you're not asking me a question, or
Mm-mm.
you're just asking me to recall a specific traumatic event, and then
Yeah.
through the use of eye movements, it helps us calm the feelings and emotions around that event, or
Maybe
is
what I would say, it's more brain work than it
okay.
is cognitive work. So we say it's from the bottom up. So it's more brain work versus thinking. So I would say sitting and talking about therapy is up down. So we're kind of going downwards from our cognitive. So you're thinking, you're talking, you're expressing yourself. This situation, you're letting go. So what we often do is we bring up the traumatic a memory, very specific scene usually, or a specific whatever has been really disturbing. And there's always a negative cognition that goes with it. And it could mean I should have done something. I'm not worthy of love. I'm permanently damaged. There's all sorts of cognitive, negative cognitions that we believe after something that has harmed us. And you bring that thought up as well. And you sit back and you let the brain work through it. So to say that it brings up all the different associations connected to that. I'm gonna give you an example. I was when I was first learning EMDR. I was the client and I was having a really difficult time with my paperwork. And I know that sounds stupid, but I I just felt really upset at all the paperwork I had. And I never felt like I was on top of it. And what if you say what's the negative cognition that went with it? I felt like I wasn't good enough to get it done. And so I just, for whatever reason, every time I was getting stuck in the fact of I wasn't doing my paperwork probably fast enough because I got overwhelmed with feeling not good enough. So when I was in EMDR, one thing that came back to me as I was working on it was all of a sudden I went into a memory of when I was little. I used to always hit a glass on my dinner table and it would spill all over the table. And
Mm.
my dad would say, I wonder if something's wrong with you, like if you have dexterity problems. And I've not thought about that in years. And so I went back. You go back, you close your eyes, you go back into the buzzies. And then another thought that came up that I had not thought about for years, and I did not even believe really was disturbing me, was that my grandma, when I was driving, would hate to drive with me. And she told my mom that she thought I was a horrible driver. And so she refused to ever drive with me after I was 16. And like that came up. I was like, this is so weird considering I'm working on doing my paperwork, right? But all these associations were coming up with not feeling good enough. Then
Mm.
another association came up, which was I was on the basketball team in high school, and I had gotten this really horrible sunburn in Mexico over spring break, and my coach took me off the starting team because I wasn't moving quite as fast as I was. My whole shoulders were all sunburned, and I was in that also was associated with being not good enough for me. And so it was multiple things that were associated with not good enough. And it wasn't just, this is why I was getting caught in my not good enough doing my paperwork. It wasn't just that one thing, feeling of not feeling good enough. It was all the associations I'd made throughout my life. And so, as a consequence, it helped me process all of that. And I would say what it did is it faded the trigger of it. It's like, not that now I feel good enough. It's like, it's just doesn't hold me as deep. I can do my paperwork and it doesn't all come up with like not feeling good enough. And I know that's a really, maybe a pretty non vulnerable like example, but it was pretty powerful to me considering I didn't know like what could really come up with not doing paperwork. And yet there were some real things that had been just picked up that I had just never considered. I never thought about that were all holding into me. And so it just helps you release some old negative cognitions that are deeply rooted and have really come up through being harmed through life. But also your trauma can also, and I get it, my paperwork was not my trauma, but a trauma can really cement some of those negative cognitions that may have always been there, but that one just really, it just wires goes really into that area. So
I appreciate that unique insight, and thank you for sharing your heart and your
yes,
experience, and like you said, something so unexpected, just doing paperwork, can send you backwards and send you
yeah.
into a moment in time, a specific moment in time
Mhm.
where you didn't even it didn't dawn on you the significance and how that played into your now adult years.
Yeah.
It's still there. It's still there in the recesses
Mhm.
of your mind, and it's still lingering, and it's impacting you. Not to say just it's still impacting you. It's still
Mhm.
coming to that frontal cortex. And
Yeah.
so, do you feel to some degree parents should be held accountable for their children's mental health struggles? Do you feel and this is an example, I'm not I'm not a therapist by any means, but do you feel like going back to the parents can help a young adult get better or heal from any potential damages that a parent caused?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question. I feel like, I guess it kind of really is, based on different situations. But I'd say this, we all pick up childhood wounds.
Mm.
And I do believe parents do their best. But we enter into somebody's life that is ongoing and usually in the middle of their life. And a lot of things are happening at the time of our birth at different times. Everybody has different things happening. And quite honestly, you're made to face all of it. And so you can reparent yourself. You can, maybe forgiveness is part of it. Um, I don't think my dad, even when I went back into those memories, I don't think he ever meant to make me feel not good enough. But so every kid and through every personality lens is going to pick up something different. What I would have picked up might have been very different than what my siblings would have picked up, because I looked at it through my personality lens. And so we're just all humans that can easily be harmed. And that's part of being a human. It's part of this human experience. And quite honestly, that is a big part of my book, which is, when I was saying stop avoiding it, it's the point is like, you were created to face all of that. You don't have, your mental health is actually not extremely fragile. There are skills you can use. There is all sorts of ways you can do and heal yourself and bring yourself up to all sorts of, like, effective living, regardless of what has happened to you. And that's the beautiful thing. It's like you can heal from everything. You can, you have the huge capacity to handle loads of hardship. And there is a lot of evidence on how to help yourself do that. So, I mean, there's definitely parents that have impact upon us. Of course, in our early childhood, our parents have a huge impact on us. And so maybe the question is, should we go back and teach parents how to be parents? I mean, I have a service dog for my son who's in a wheelchair, and it's a highly trained service dog. I'll tell you, I went through more training on that dog than I ever did when I had my 4 children.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
they made sure I knew how to take him out and had certain things with him. And so nobody made me taught me how to take my kids out and deal with temper tantrums and all the other things, that you do as a parent. But so we do, like, it is it's a wild world out there, as far as parenting and being raised. But the fact is your brain is made for it all, and you have the ability to live through it all. So
And that's fair. I pose a question because I grew up with an abusive mother. I
mm,
grew up with a mother who was physically and verbally abusive. And
mhm,
so one of the things I've always one of the things I tried to do was go back, right?
mm,
Reconciliation, reconcile. Even
yeah,
if even if not actually getting like a full-blown apology, but just listen, it got to a place for me where I went back home one time. This is many years ago, while I was still in the military service. I went home on leave, and I made it a point for myself to confront my mother
mm,
and confront my mother. And in her advanced age, I won't say old, but in her advanced age, she still tried. I'm an
mm,
adult. I'm a full blown paying your bills, got your own stuff adult. And even in when I approached her, I knocked on her door, and she seemingly was excited. She still tried to regress back to some of the abusive tactics of
mm,
manipulation and tried to get me to do things for her, and tried to use that parenting title
mm,
to minimize me and who I
mhm,
was. And in that moment, I said, "Listen," I'll never forget it till the day I die. Remember catching myself because I felt myself minimizing in front of her because she
mhm,
was trying to tell me, you need to fix my car, my light bill is due, and just overpower me. And I'm a grown man. And
mhm,
I had to stop her in that moment. I said, listen, enough is enough. I'm not fixing your car. I'm not paying your bill. I'm not doing any of the things that you just asked me to do. I'm here to just check on you and lay eyes on you. And that's it. There's
mm,
not going to be the continuous perpetuation of this manipulation now that I'm adult and I'm out of your house.
mm,
And that second, she broke down, fell, and cried.
mm.
And I guess in some ways that was an apology, right?
Yeah.
But that was not my intention. That wasn't my intention to do that to her. But that's why I brought up the question: should parents
Yeah.
be held accountable for their children's mental health struggles? And now my second part to this question is there ever justification for estranging yourself from a toxic family member? Do you ever
Mm.
have a client or clients, because you've been doing this a long time, many years of experience?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is estrangement ever a good idea to estrange yourself from certain family members that are just not good for you?
Yeah. Well, that's a hard one, Marcus, because estrangement is becoming more and more common, and I really have a struggle with that. I think I don't know. I really feel like estrangement really depends on. I mean, I have clients whose children have estranged from them due to political differences. No, I don't think that's appropriate. So I feel like it just really, what level of toxicity are we talking about? If it's difference of opinions, or if it's like, oh, I just don't like how, what, they see things, I see things different. I don't want to speak to them, or they need to apologize. I don't know. Oftentimes we don't get apologies that we're looking for. So is estrangement ever? Maybe at times it is. I feel like maybe there are certain situations that maybe the toxic relationship is so toxic that it's unable to be healed or even managed with proper boundaries. Um, but I do think that's rare. I think we could manage relationships in adulthood in different ways than we were able to in childhood. And that is with boundaries and with a clear understanding of just how different we are, and that you want to do something different. There's there's so many things, so many times I've also seen that sometimes parents are better grandparents than they were even parents in their older age. They had been able
Mm.
to become better and have a redo. Um, there's nothing more beautiful than watching relationships that can be healed, in the recovery of that. It is difficult to go through forgiveness. Forgiving our parents is actually a part of my book. Forgiveness is a big coping skill, and so forgiving our parents, getting ourselves out of that childhood, adult and child situation that we live in, when we're young, but coming up to two adults and into a place of being able to forgive them, um, in a way that you can relate to them as an adult. Keeping our parents in the doghouse at some point keeps us tied to childhood a little bit tighter than maybe we should. And so there is a parts of all of that that we have to release in order to become complete adults with them. And part of our journey in adulthood is putting a period on childhood and moving forth. And acknowledging the pain and the hurt, and especially like what you were saying, Marcus, to go through some of the abuse that you went through and go through all that you would have, all that would impact you in the present. Um, that's probably been a real journey for you to be able to trust others, even in your intimate relationships. Like, how do you build trust again? There are certain things that were really hurt in those situations. And so, like, learning how to heal yourself in that, um, it just makes for a lot harder healing. But do I think estrangement is the way to healing, and it's maybe the only way to healing? I absolutely think you can heal without estranging the parent. Um, but I know and I understand situations, and every case is different. Um, it's hard. It's hard. And in our culture, we have a lot, when I was working in fire, we have a lot of elderly parents that their kids have estranged from them. They're out there in the world on their own, and the only people they can call is 911. And that was really shocking to me because we'd go to these elderly people's house and, they needed, their prescriptions picked up, you know, little things like that. And they don't have a
Basics
single
things.
person. Yeah, they don't have a single person in the world to call. And you could say, well, that's cause and effect. And I agree with that. There's probably many reasons for that, that older person is alone. Um, it's a tragedy, and it's what there is plenty of them out there in the world that are alone that probably have not been the best parents. And so it is a complicated question, and it's a complicated, it's not just a simple yes or no in my perspective on estrangement. It's a very
It
detrimental thing to do. And
it absolutely is. I now realize in my later years that might be the outcome for my mother, right? Because
mm,
I have several siblings, some older, some younger, um, and it has gotten to a point where it hits me from time to time that because of my parents' actions, my mother's actions,
yeah.
um, it might come to that point where
mm,
she is coming to the phase of her life where she needs things, like truly needs things, but
yeah.
because of you know how she raised us and raised her kids, that she she's going to have to deal with those things alone, some of
hmm
those things because of her past. But you also said a point earlier that our parents have done the best they know how to do, and that
hmm
also plays in my head. The caveat I didn't mention was my mom grew up in an abusive home as well. So when you said that, that also correlates as well. Parents, I think ultimately in the grand big picture, do
hmm
the best that they know how,
yeah.
based off of what they've been given, what they've been taught, and the tools they've been equipped with. And so, knowing that, do you punish someone because they didn't know any better? And
mm,
that changes a mindset, and that changes a paradigm, I think, within all of us. If we think about that, your parents did the best they could do,
mm.
and that might change the narrative in your head about how you view your mother, how you view your father. And
Yeah.
so that's why I didn't expect you to have a one shot fits all, Miss Gina. But
Mhm.
you see how the way she tackled that, yo? She tackled that question like a champ.
I I think Marcus too. There's a scripture, and your faith does have a part of how you feel like you can forgive, but that love your enemies and pray for those who have persecuted you. We often want to think our enemies are the people out there. It's like, I don't have that many enemies. But your enemy can be often your spouse when you're in an argument. It can be your parents. It can be the people that you're very close to. And to like be challenged to love your enemy, to love the person who had no skills to raise you, who was challenged in every way, had no ability to have any coping skills to deal with stress and all the pain that comes up. There's so much that comes up in parenting. And so to have to turn around and to offer undeserved forgiveness is a high calling and something that is now when I say undeserved forgiveness, I mean somebody who isn't in there saying like, Marcus, will you please forgive me on that? And I'm also not saying undeserved forgiveness means you go into a relationship with no boundaries, and then all of a sudden you just throw trust. We're a big happy family and now we spend all the holidays together. That doesn't even mean that, but there is a point of being able to offer undeserved forgiveness that releases you from the trauma too. And
Absolutely.
it is like, I know I'm no longer needing to hold her accountable to it. It's over. I think, that's it's the very most difficult thing you could probably do in your life, to
Absolutely.
offer your enemy undeserved forgiveness, but it releases you too. It releases you from the trauma.
It sure does. It sure does. Miss Gina, one of the things that came to my mind, and I need your perspective, and y'all, for those watching and the audio listeners, she can only speak to her respective states because the state laws vary from state to state. in any profession. But I'd like for you to answer this next question with your state guidelines as to children's privacy. And that was a unique thing for me coming into the space.
Yeah.
Is I had no idea that in my state that a child 14 years of age and older can seek out mental health counseling and can
Mm,
seek out a
mm.
therapist on their own, completely
Wow.
separate from the parents.
Wow.
And their parents are not allowed to have any of what's said in therapy disclosed
Wow.
to them. And so I'd like to
Jeez.
you to speak to yeah, children's therapy. And
Wow.
it happened to me. It had a young girl. She was
Wow.
14. She reached out, submitted the online application,
Yeah.
added a credit card, debit card from somewhere, and uploaded. Our platform requires her to upload an insurance card, front and back image,
Okay.
and so had done the entire thing, and then when she filled out the online application, it transposes into her profile automatically. And when I
Okay.
saw how old she was, it immediately prompted me to call her and say, "Ma'am, I need to know your parents' information so I can, set up their profile." And she's like, "Well, what are you going to ask them? What are you going to say to them?" And she really became defensive when I started inquiring as to who her parent or guardian was. And that then I had to educate myself because I was ready to cancel the session with because
Yeah.
she had filled out everything and I had booked the appointment and I was ready to cancel it. But then I was educated and I learned that she's allowed to do that
Wow.
because she was
Wow.
seeking therapy. So can you speak to children's privacy? Can a parent should a parent be allowed to inquire about what's being said in therapy or anything
Well,
like that?
Marcus, the funny thing is I, to be truly honest, I never see kids. I only see adults
That's
21
fair.
and over, and I don't take insurance. And so I do not know, but that is news to me. Actually, I would have to do my own research as well. So that would be that's very interesting. I did not know that. So, and you're correct. Every state has a little bit of a different guidelines and everything else. It's so, but gosh, I don't know.
that
I did not
that
know
is
that.
It is bonkers. So let's pivot then.
Yeah.
I want to talk. Are you you're so now I know you're cash pay.
Yeah.
You don't take insurance.
You're right.
Um, do what are you virtual or in office?
In office.
Perfect. What are your
Mostly all in office. Yeah.
most? But you do some telehealth.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. If somebody's on a vacation and they need, a telehealth, I will. As long as their primary location is in Arizona. Um, so sometimes in the summer I'll do some more telehealth than not, but more than anything, I am in the office. Even through COVID, I was only seeing people face to face, and so it seems to work the best. I have a I do to cash, and I'll tell you why. I love the fact that they own their own notes, and the insurance doesn't own their notes,
Mhm.
and that's a big one. I also, you know, I'm not really diagnosis focused, and so that's also another one for me.
So wait,
Um,
let me clarify. You
mhm.
don't because you're cash. You don't document anything that's said to you
I do
in.
document it,
Okay.
but the insurance doesn't own it. It's theirs to own, so it still would be called into court if they need, if it was to that extreme. I still carry, you know, all their documentation and treatment plans and everything else in my electronic files.
Gotcha.
But it's not being submitted to insurance, and
Absolutely.
therefore it just is one of those, unless they are wanting to submit, they do, some get super bills, and so I do a diagnosis on those clients and give them a super bill and stuff. So I just believe that they have more options with paying cash. I also felt like it was a it I do not believe, um, I don't believe therapy should be free, or it should be a sacrifice, and we need to get our work done. And And so I have a lot of buy-in on that. So I had worked for a few years in community where it was a lot of them had state insurance. A lot of my clients, all my clients had state insurance, and so there was zero payment from them. Um, I felt like that was. I mean, I'd never been in a place that had so many no-shows. And so that became a very interesting, like, whoa, why so many no-shows, And so it, when you're paying for it, you're very conscientious of when you make your appointment and you come and you don't overstay. You're not in for years. We just get our work done and move forward. So that seems to work well in my model that I've set
Absolutely.
up. So. Mhm.
Absolutely. Gina, spilling the
I
tea.
love this.
Spilling the tea on Gentleman Style Podcast Show. Ms. Gina, I want to ask you your thoughts on social media. That's the new buzzword, social
Gosh,
media.
right? Yeah.
How has social media affected people that you've experienced, your clients? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it neutral? Is it not? Is it all in our head? Is it all fupa? Like, social media isn't bad. You're okay. You can doom scroll all night long. What are your thoughts on social media affecting our mental state?
Yeah, well, I'm fortunate I didn't grow up with social media, and my kids were just on the brink of it. I think my older twins were just coming out of high school, and my younger were in, and so it was just beginning. It was just kind of coming up at the point, Instagram and all the Snap and all the stuff. I will tell you, I think social media has played a huge role in impacting couples and relationships. It's never been easier to be in touch with old exit, your exes, and it's never been easier than now to even figure out what everyone's doing. I have some clients that often will say like, oh, I just needed to know my ex is doing well, so they have to go, and it's so easy for you to find people, and oh, it's just been so, it increases anxiety in such an incredible way. I also feel bad for, I also see it a lot with young parents, and they're constantly comparing how, what they're doing, the trips they're taking, all of it. And then of course we can go into the younger kids that are paying attention to what their friends are doing and how you're looking and everything else. And so I find social media needs to have a lot of boundaries on it, and it needs, even when you're an adult, you need to have a boundary on it. I do think it's kind of part of getting your endorphins, and so it's one of those, like, you got to pay attention to it. I do not feel like it's unhelpful. I do think it has been unhelpful in some ways. I I like it in other ways. So you definitely have to have boundaries on it. And I don't even know if I would bring it into a kid's life until as late as possible, because it's just, once you start it, there's some sort of addicting. I like how you said the doom scrolling, because that is what happens. You just get caught up in that. And it's another way to avoid. It's another way to numb from your present moment. And I think that's the worst part of it. You are just somewhere else, you can be somewhere else in a room full of the people you love, and you're somewhere else. And it's just a difficult thing to know how to manage, and the boundaries that you need on it. And everyone is impacted differently in some ways with it. So there
Absolutely.
definitely has to be a balance in it, and there definitely and I don't find it that helpful. I
Absolutely.
have clients that I'm surprised at, that are adults even, and they're, fighting on Facebook, which I don't even understand that, but
Hmm. Absolutely.
it's rough, and that it's hard enough to disagree and have conflict, but then to put it publicly out there,
Get rid
it's
of it,
hard.
y'all.
Yeah.
Get rid of it. Get rid of the social media. This is absolute. I wanna plug back into the book. Where can people find your book? Where can people get a copy of the book? And what
Yeah.
can readers, potential readers, future readers expect to get out of the book? Is called Stop Avoiding It. What
Yeah.
can people expect?
You can, first of all, it's on Amazon, and it has, you can read a little bit about it on there, but I've gone through 8 coping skills. What I did, I have developed this huge, probably like 26 coping skills. And I just felt really compelled to put it into a book. And so I said, well, I don't want to put 26 coping skills. What would I say would be the best, like 8 that I've watched people change their lives? And so that's what I picked. I picked self-awareness, which I think is the number one coping skill, to figure out what it is that you're adding to your chaos of your own life. And that's a really huge one. So self-awareness is huge. So we start there and then we move on from there. I have boundaries, radical acceptance, which is one of my favorites, forgiveness, which is also extremely powerful, active listening, finding joy in sorrow, using faith as a coping skill. And all of these are ways that we can continue to like improve and get unstuck. And why I use the stop avoiding, I realize that we spend so much of our time trying to avoid difficult conversations, pains that have brought it, like have come up for us. We just spend so much time avoiding it, and yet there's so many other ways to deal with it. And so there's chopped through full of neuroscience studies, and I have put in a lot of scripture because I see it through the lens of like there's so much your faith can do to help you in coping with life. And so the scripture is just one more way of dealing with things and embracing how to face this difficult, hard world, because things will come up, and they always do, and pain will come up, and destruction of some relationships or conflict, or all sorts of things. And how do you face it and stop just avoiding or numbing it? And I found so many of my clients were wanting to just numb or not talk about it or just avoid it or end things. And so these are coping skills to kind of work through all that.
Love it. It's on Amazon, y'all. Go get a copy today. It's on Kindle for 99 cents as well. You can also get a paperback. I love paperback, $15.99. Get your copies today. Get out and get busy, y'all. This has been an epic conversation. This has been absolutely wonderful. Miss Gina, thank you for spilling the tea.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you for allowing us to pick your brain. See that? We get to pick the therapist's brain.
That's right.
Miss Gina,
Marcus, it's been a great time being with you too. And I wish you the best. I love your podcast. I think it's awesome. You're reaching so many people, and so I'm really proud of you. So love it. Thank you for having me.
You heard it, y'all. Miss Gina, how can people connect with you? How can people find you?
You can find me either on stopavoidingit.com, or you can find me on my website for my counseling, which is mindhelm, HELM.org. So you can find me there too. So I'm on Instagram or all the other awful social media that we don't want.
Yeah, that'd be a contradiction. We just told you stay away, and then it's like, oh, go find me on Instagram.
I know.
Love it. Connect, y'all.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for making time for being here. And I want to say this to you publicly. Never give up. We need you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
You too,
absolutely.
Marcus.
We got to let her go, y'all. She is absolutely changing the world. One life, one family member, one counseling session, one EMDR moment at a time. But if you want to catch her on the flip side on her website. For our audio listeners, that's mindhelm.org. Connect. Like we end every show. Take care of your friends. Take care of your family. And always, take care of business. This is Marcus, your favorite gentleman, and the superfragilist Miss Gina. I'm a mess. I've been avoiding it all show. Yanovitch.
Yeah.
Yanovitch. Check her out. Get connected. She is dope. Later, y'all. Bye.